So don't throw this paper away, because you may need to come back and verify sizes. If something breaks on you, you may want this paper to know how big you originally cut your rails to, or something like that, or how big the panel was. So I would hold on to this paper until you're done with your project, just in case you need to come in and do something else to your project. I've got all of my parts to my door ready. I've got my rails, my stiles, and my panels. Now the panel is going to sit in the middle and it floats. It can't be glued in, because when the wood expands and contracts, the wood's going to be sitting different ways, and the wood's going to expand and contract differently based on the piece. We're going to use some spacers to go in this groove so that the panel stays centered in there and it's not loose and rattles around. Here's two different types of spacers we have. They both work equally well. One's a 1/4 inch little rubber ball. The other is a 1/4 inch little piece of foam. Whatever you have on hand, or whatever you can get available from your supplier, is what I would use. Now today we're going to use the little rubber ball, and we're going to put them in there. Now I have to be careful when I insert these that I don't get them in the way of the rail. What I mean by that is that this tongue needs to fit into this groove. I want to make sure my little space ball is not in the way. I want to make sure that little space ball, once it gets pushed down, is not in the way of the tongue of that rail. So I would not put it that close to the edge. I would come in a little bit and then push that down in there so that it does not interfere with that rail. So I like to line up all my pieces, and I can go ahead and insert my space balls. I'm going to do 2 in each one. That way it's kind of stable. It's not just sitting on one ball in the middle of these little pieces. Same with on our stiles. I'm going to come in and put 2 minimum on each one. You could do more if you wanted. You could put 1 in the middle. Okay. On a small door like this is fine. If you get one of these balls that's in the way, what you can do is take your pencil or pen and get down in there and pop that ball out, and then move it down so it's out of the way. We are limited on time when gluing up, so we want to make sure we have everything ready to go so that we don't have our glue starting to dry while we're going to get something. One thing I'm going to have handy is a little mallet. So once I glue this together, I can tap and make sure that my stiles are sitting flat. We'll talk about that more in a minute. I'm going to take my rails, I'm going to take 1 set of them, and I'm going to put them together face to face so that this little radius is together. And when I put glue on, I can put heavy glue on the back side, on this tongue, on the top of the tongue. Even I can go pretty heavy on the front of the tongue. But on this radius, on this inside slope here, I want to only put glue about halfway up. And you'll see that as we put this on. The reason for that is when I put glue on there, when I put this joint together, I don't want to have any glue oozing out on an inside corner, especially my good corner. So I'm going to resist from putting too much glue on that front radius when I put this together. So I'm going to line one set up. I'm going to take my glue, and I've got a little paintbrush. I'm going to dip it in there. I'm going to heavily put it on and brush it around, and you'll see we're only going to go about halfway up on this radius and on this flat edge here. All right, here we go. So I'm going to put heavy glue on the rail on that back shoulder all the way up to the edge. Heavy glue on the top of the tongue. And now I'm coming to the inside, so on this back of the tongue here, I can do a good amount. But on this radius and flat spot is where I need to be careful. So I'm going to take my glue and I'm going to put it in only about halfway up at the most is all. So I've got good coverage everywhere except for about halfway up, because that glue is going to travel a little bit in there. So I want to make sure I don't have it traveling too far up. When I finish that side, I'm going to flip it over, get going on this side. Remember, we've got to work quickly as the glue is starting to set and cure, so I'm going to work kind of quickly at this. So I've got my pieces all glued together. Now I'm going to start assembling, and I'm going to just put this on, and I'm going to put this hanging off the edge a little bit here. I don't want this nice and even, and because if I'm in too far and then I have to move it, I'm going to have glue smear around. So I'm going to have it hang off just slightly off the end. I'm going to take my panel next and put that in. And I'm going to take my other rail and put that in. Now I'm going to take my last stile and line this all up. And I've got my door. Now I'm going to put it in my clamps. All right, I got my door in the clamps. Now I'm going to take my mallet and get these even. I want this nice and flush on the end. When the stile and the rail meets, I want that nice and even. And if that glue's starting to get stiff on you, you can use a mallet to tap in one side or the other. We don't want one sticking out further than the other because these are cut to size. We don't have much room to trim these down when we're done. So I'm going to get them even. I'm going to come to the other side and do the same thing. Take my mallet and push this rail in. And then I'm going to start gluing it or clamping it up. And I'm going to clamp it. I want to leave some corner exposed so I can measure and make sure we're square when we're done. So I'm putting some pressure on. I'm making sure those still feel flush. And I'm going to use my mallet to persuade them to go in or out. And when I'm done, I'm going to tighten that up. I'm going to come to the other side and do the same thing. Leave some corner exposed so I can measure from corner to corner. And I'm going to start tightening that up. Before I tighten everything up good, I want this pieces to be nice and flat along that bottom bar. You can see right now this stile on this left side over here is kind of flared up a little bit. And if I come down here and look, I'm touching in the middle where this rail is, and then the side is flared up a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our mallet and we're going to hit these pretty hard. We want these to sit down nice and flat. Okay, and then you can tighten it up a little bit more if you want. And make sure those are sitting down nice and flat. It's going to make you have a better end product when you're done. So now the last thing I'm going to do after I've got that hammered down is I'm going to take my tape measure, measure corner to corner and make sure we're square. I'm getting 29 inches on this side. And I'm going to measure corner to corner on this side, and I'm getting 29 inches. So because we took the time and squared up our wood before we started, when I got everything nice and even on the ends, it's nice and square now. So this door, when we glued it up, was not quite square. It was off just slightly, about a 32nd of an inch. I don't know if that was much to mess with, but what we're going to do is take a clamp on the longer side, and we're going to measure from the opposite side, and we're going to watch the tape measure. So if I knew if I was off a 32nd of an inch, I would maybe watch it split the difference. So if I was a 16th total, I would want to go a 32nd. We could always square these up a little bit when we're done. After we're done gluing them together, we could cut them on the saw to get them nice and even. But this is what it would look like when you're squaring it up. Put a clamp on the longer side to pull the two sides so they're even. So right now my two sides are at 29 inches when I measure both directions at a diagonal. That would be the process for gluing up your doors. Remembering to use those spacers, hammering your stiles down flat so they're sitting tight against the rail, and we could check that now that we've got everything tightened up. See how that's sitting. Still a little bit of a gap on that side. We could hammer down so it sits nice and flat. Now that we've got this glued up, I'm going to let this panel or this door sit overnight if possible. Minimum, I would let it sit an hour, but if possible, let it sit overnight with those clamps on there. If you need to do more, then go ahead and move this off the table, get another set of clamps, and you can glue your other door together. If you have any questions on this, please talk to your instructor. They will help get these questions answered for you.